We live closer together than ever before, but we're more alienated from each other than ever before. And we feel very alone. We feel so isolated. And part of what brings us to astrology is the desire to feel connected to something bigger. And it's the desire for meaning, which is part of being connected to something bigger. And I think it is this idea that if we're connected to the sky, then we're connected to everyone and everything, which means we're connected to each other.
Welcome to Collective Guidance. I'm your host, Charla Goodnight. Today, my guest has been named by French Vanity Fair as one of the top 12 astrologers on the planet. That's right, on the planet, crowning her a pioneer in video astrology. Nadiya Shah is an award-winning astrologer, author, media personality, and is one of the few people in the world to hold an MA in the cultural study of cosmology and divination from the University of Kent in the UK. In 2013, Nadiya Shah launched Synchronicity publications dedicated to written content celebrating astrology and the New Age. Since then, Synchronicity publications has become synonymous with quality throughout the entire astrological community. Nadiya Shah is the author of several books. Her last 3 books debuted as #1 new releases in New Age astrology on Amazon. Congrats, Nadiya. Her school, which I absolutely love, and it is so reasonable to take classes in this school. Synchronicity University came about in 2015, and it's currently one of the best astrology schools online, featuring Nadiya and her trusted astrologer. She's not the only one teaching. She has a great YouTube channel, and she is one of the most watched astrology channels in the world. I love watching her every single week to just get the energetic forecast. Friends and fans of her work have described her horoscopes as inspiring, hopeful, and spookily accurate. An internationally acclaimed speaker and media personality, Nadiya is seen around the world celebrating astrology and affirming a wise and loving universe for us all. Welcome, Nadiya. I'm immensely grateful for you joining us today and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Charla. Thank you for sharing me with your audience.
Yeah, Nadiya, I find it very curious. How did someone with a master's degree in comparative religion end up becoming a professional astrologer?
Well, it was an amazing program, actually. I had just started really dedicating my life to full-time astrology. And it was actually, well, to give you a little bit of background, it was like in 2004, there was this move that astrologers had to bring astrology back into Western universities. And it was like the late 1700s when astrology was basically chased out of Western universities. It's still taught at the university level as a social science and as a science in some places in India, for example. But in the West, it was not really something that was happening, but they really wanted it to happen. And it led to the launch of 4 programs, 2 in the UK and 2 in the US. And so I had the pleasure of being part of the 2007 class of the program that took place at the University of Kent in the United Kingdom. And it was called Cultural Cosmology and Divination with the Faculty of Religious Studies. And it was so incredible to, first of all, learn from people that I'd looked up to for so many years, who'd inspired me, who'd written works that were really important in terms of astrology and more. But it was also something that ultimately ended up really grounding me in reverence for what I do, like a real sense of respect for what I do, to understand that astrology is actually very intertwined with religious understanding, religious history, religious growth. we see astrological symbolisms throughout religious texts, like all the major religious texts in some way evoke this understanding that what's happening in the sky is affirming or validating or speaking to the legitimacy of whatever might be happening with key figures in that particular religious tradition. So it was amazing to see that how the whole world has been part of developing the astrological knowledge that we have today, and to understand that those are really broad shoulders on which we as astrologers today stand on, that we benefit from. And so, yeah, to me, it's so natural to think about how religion and astrology go together, because they've always kind of gone together. I mean, if you think about, for example, the three wise men and the Star of Bethlehem, that is an astrological phenomenon, that these wise men, so called wise men, were trusting, and they saw it, and it led them to change their behavior because they had faith in the astrological symbol that they were seeing. And so we see stories like this again and again throughout different religious traditions. And so to me, it was just so fascinating. It was just such a wonderful experience to have to explore that at a graduate level.
Wasn't there a Star of Bethlehem experience not too long ago, like a couple of years ago, or maybe this past year?
Yeah, so they say that it is what's called the Great Conjunction, the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. That is sometimes considered what it was that they saw with the Star of Bethlehem. They saw the Great Conjunction in the sign of Pisces. And, we talk about the ages, and it was sort of this understanding of the birth of Jesus Christ, and of course before him the Buddha, that really exemplified the age of Pisces itself and what it represented, this idea of compassion, of giving, of sacrifice as part of being closer to God, right? To put it in that language. And so it's said that the Star of Bethlehem was essentially the Great Conjunction. It was the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Now, these two planets do conjunct every 20 years. And every time they do, it represents this brand new chapter, this really big shift. And the Great Conjunctions kind of come in groups, like they change their dominant sign every 200 to 300 years. And so, yeah, the Great Conjunction in Pisces was a really big deal in how it heralded a new understanding of spirituality. And, interestingly, I'll give you a little bit of a side note. In like in the US and Canada, in the UK, when we have the annual astrologers day or astrology day, it is normally the first day of spring, which is the start of the zodiac calendar, March 21st. However, in Latin America, they have a day called the Day of the Three Kings, which, if I remember correctly, is January 6th. And this celebrates the three wise men. And actually, in Latin America, this day is when gifts are given, not necessarily Christmas or Christmas Eve. It is the Day of the Three Kings when gifts are given to each other and especially to children. And so this is also Astrologers' Day in Latin America, because we see ourselves in that day, because we see the three wise men as one of us, or the three kings as they call it.
Wow, I did not know that. Thank you for that. Yeah. When did you become an astrologer? And how did you build your career in astrology and make it mainstream now? Like what's your experience with it?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many layers of that, right? So there's the journey of pursuing astrological insight, right? Having the passion for it and trusting it. And then there's the professional journey as essentially an entrepreneur and a spiritual entrepreneur, as I like to call it. But I always knew, like growing up, that there were a lot of stories about basically people in my lineage who were into the esoteric arts. We can put it that way, the different esoteric arts. And when I was growing up, I remember like my aunts and my mom on both sides of my family were really into like astrologers and psychics and, really fascinated by it. And it was a thing where they went for readings and they would come back and say, oh, this psychic told me this about you. This astrologer told me that. And when I was 14 years old, it's actually quite interesting because here in Toronto, we have like the last 3 weeks of summer, there's this big fair called the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition. And these last 3 weeks of the year, what used to happen, I think now it's all online, but back then, way back in the day, what would happen is they would have like job day. So couple of weeks usually before the start of the CNE, you would go and there would be like this space where they would have these boards up with little cards, and you would go and you would pick out the cards you wanted, and normally like you went to the right table, they interviewed you, and you would get the job like sort of on the spot because they had to hire a couple thousand people for 3 weeks, and you'd get a lot of students in particular, lots of young people would be there. And I remember I was 14 and I went out for this job day, basically. And I just chose a card off of a board and I didn't even know what it was for. But I remember going and the guy literally just talked to me for like 2 or 3 minutes and he hired me. And then he gave me this sheet of paper and it had the drawing of a hand and it had like these arrows pointed at the different lines. And it was saying, this is your headline, this is your heart line. And if the line goes up, this is what it means. If it goes down, this is what it means. And he said, okay, here, learn this. And I remember I was back there like just a couple days after that. I was doing readings. I was doing like 50 to 75 palms a day over the
Wow.
course of 3 weeks. And people kept telling me I was good at it, right? Like that's one thing I really remember as a child. Again, I was 14 years old. And so after that was over, my mom, she started telling everybody. Anytime we go to a party, it was like, oh, she reads hands, she reads hands. And so people were like putting their hands in my face. I really didn't like it. But it was right around that time that my family started giving me like astrology books and saying, hey, I think you're going to be good at this. And I remember at 19, my Aunt Shireen, who's sometimes on my channel now, she's a tarot reader and a spiritual life coach. She was the one who did two things. I was 19 years old. One of the things she did was, I remember she put a tarot deck in my hands, and that night I was doing readings for her people. She had like a small home based business, and I was like doing readings for people that night. And the other thing she did is she gave me a printout of my chart and it
Mm.
had like an explanation. So at the time, you would order it in advance at the New Age store. And she picked it up and she gave it to me. And I still have that because that was a big moment for me because I felt like, oh my God, this is me. This is me on paper. And I'd never thought of that before. And it just really just grew from there. I mean, I just loved astrology. And I remember before I went to university, I was doing readings. Like I was working at Walmart and doing readings behind the cash register for my fellow associates. And after that, while I was still in university, I remember working in a call center and people would say, hey, I heard that you do readings. Let me pay you $10 to do the reading. If you do a reading for me, I can do this for you. And it just really grew from there. Like people just heard that I did readings. They started offering me more and more money to do them. And then it just became really clear. Like I went through a really hard time, like what I call a dark night of the soul. And on the other side of that, what really was like my harbinger of coming out of that time was going into astrology full time because it was astrology that was really there for me during this really difficult transition of my life. And to be able to now use astrology to help people with that in their own journeys, in their own times of transitioning from one phase of life into another. It's kind of poetic. It's so perfect, but it's kind of how it ended up working out. And now here I am in September, it'll be 20 years as a full-time astrologer. It's really exciting.
That's incredible. Huge congrats on that. For someone that's new to astrology, how would you explain how it actually works?
There are different ways to understand how it works. That's a really good question. That's a great question. Um, Carl Jung thought it worked by what he called synchronicity, which is what he considered to be what he coined, quote, a meaningful coincidence, is how he understood it, a meaningful coincidence. Early in his career, he talked about the seed moment. There's this very famous quote attributed to by him, which is, it goes to the effect that anything that begins in a moment sort of carries the energy of that moment. So it's called the seed theory. And that's how he looked at the birth chart, for example. But later on in his career, he replaced that with the theory of synchronicity. So he thought that it was kind of like a moment of a reading and a relationship that the reader has with the chart and the person that the chart represents, or the entity the chart represents. And he understood it differently, like basically the idea that you get the message that you're meant to at the right time. And the astrology chart and astrology can serve as a tool that can awaken whatever that message is. But until it is that you are really ready to receive the symbol, it will elude you. So these were some ideas that he had, and these are some ways to understand what astrology is or how it functions. Some people think of it as a science, they think of it as like metaphysics, and that can be one way to understand it as well. I think as astrologers, what we're doing is essentially, I consider it an act of poetry. So basically, we're taking this leap in a way. We are looking at what otherwise doesn't have words. It's a symbol in the sky, and we're giving it words. And, I'm reminded of the phrase, you can't have astrology without the astrologer. And I do think that it's the astrologer that imbues meaning on the sky. But that meaning is based on who it is that we are, who we bring to the sky. And so I'm so grateful you expressed how you resonate with what I share and the way that I present astrology and the way that I interpret the sky. And that is rooted in my own worldview and what I'm looking for when I look at the sky. But somebody else with a very different worldview, like, for example, one of my taglines, one of the things I say is the universe is wise and loving. Like, it's the name of one of my books as well. But somebody who doesn't look at the world that way, who sees the world as cruel and fatalistic or filled with scary things, they're going to see the sky very differently. And their interpretations are going to be really different as a result. And so I think that there's this relationship that we as astrologers have with the sky. And maybe that in some way connects to our understanding of, well, is it a science? Is it a spiritual practice? Is it not just a religious practice, but is it a spiritual experience? Or is it formulas and calculations? It can be all of that depending on what you bring to your understanding of astrology. And in some ways, astrology, it kind of just is like the sky just is. It's the astrologer that ends up allowing astrology to actually come alive.
So it's very individualistic.
I think so, because to me, it was always a thing that had to do with my relationship with myself, my relationship with spirit, my relationship with soul. And so that's what I bring to it. Like, I see it as something with very deep spiritual roots. You know, there was a media place that asked me about, why do you think people like astrology?
Mhm.
And, because of the kind of person I am, I gave this really big answer because that's who I am. That's my understanding. And some people think it's, a lot more literal, like what you get out of it. But for me, I'm reminded of one of my dear professors, Patrick Curry, right? He co-wrote Pulling Down the Moon, and he's written a whole bunch of very respected academic works around astrology and animism and so much more. And he has this correlation he makes in one of his writings where he says that he connects it to the idea of Max Weber. So Max Weber was sort of the godfather of sociology, as we understand it today as a discipline. And Max Weber talked about what he called the iron cage of postmodernism. It's this idea that we live closer together than ever before, but we're more alienated from each other than ever before. And we feel very alone. We feel so isolated. And part of what brings us to astrology is the desire to feel connected to something bigger. And it's the desire for meaning, which is part of being connected to something bigger. And I think it is this idea that if we're connected to the sky, then we're connected to everyone and everything, which means we're connected to each other. And I think that's what we're really going for, is that we want a moment of spiritual relevance, of meaning, of healing. That's what I think we're really going for, or at least that's what it feels like the people who are drawn to the way I interpret the sky are likely being drawn to the sky for. Again, that's not everybody. I've had lots of astrologers say to me over the years, like, I just want to tell the future. And they're like, okay, that's great. There's techniques to do that. That's part of our tradition. But for me, it always felt like more than that. And so that's what I've really emphasized in my own work.
One of the things that I love most about your work is you give weeklies and they are very consistent, coming out every Sunday, unless you have been sick. And that's totally understandable. But besides that, you are highly reliable. And the way that you remind your listeners to have compassion for where they are in the human experience and how to work with the energy. So thank you for that. Your weeklies are incredible and your monthlies are quite spectacular too. If you join her superstar on her website.
Thank you for that testimonial. Thank you for saying how consistent I am and things like that, because boy, I can be really hard on myself. So it's interesting because you just said, wow, you're so consistent and you remind us to be compassionate. And I'm like, oh God, I am still learning to be more compassionate towards me because
Are you a Virgo though? You're a Virgo though,
no,
aren't
my
you?
mom is a Virgo though, and I
Okay.
love my mom very much. But I think I have a very strong like Saturn signature in my chart. We can put it
Mm,
that way, to put it
okay.
simply. So I've got lots of strong Saturnian energy in my chart. My mom, the Virgo, right? I hear her voice in my head say, if you want more, produce more. Right. Like that's one thing that I remember her saying to me. And sometimes I don't always know what is it more that I'm wanting, but I just know that if I produce something, it's going to get me there, or at least it's going to get me closer to there, even if I don't really know always or feel very connected to what that there actually is. I think for me, I just always wanted to do something that was meaningful to people. And I always wanted to leave a legacy. Like, I think that, again, very Saturnian. And it means a lot to me now. Like my parents, they're so proud of me and they brag about me. And it's such a beautiful thing.
It's always great information. And so, how do you personally use astrology in your life? And do you make big decisions based on it?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes.
Mm.
Yes, I do. Like, I think if you're not going to live it, why do it? Why be a proponent for it? And I say that to myself and I remind myself of that. For example, just off the top of my head, example, last year in January of 2025, I was in Australia and I got there in January. My birthday is like in the later part of January. And I loved it. I'll tell you, I loved it. Australia is incredible. It is such a magical place. Like they have animals like nowhere else in the world. And the energy is like a whole other thing than I'd ever experienced. I mean, at that point, like I was sort of racing towards 50 countries. I'd set this goal that I was going to go to 50 countries before I turned 50. I was really enjoying myself. I wanted to stay, but my birthday was coming up and I saw like we have this technique called solar return.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on this idea that, where you are on your birthday, it carries like the seed that I was talking about earlier with Jung. It carries the energy of that moment. And I knew, and I saw the chart and I was like, well, look, the seed, the energy of me staying in Australia for my birthday, not the best energy for the year ahead. I should really be back in Canada. I should be home. And so I was there, I was enjoying myself, and I was like, Nadia, if you're not going to live it, then what are you doing? Right? Like, really, what are you doing? So I got myself back to Canada in January. I made myself go back. I took a train from where I live here to another town so that I could get that chart. And I was like, yeah, like I have to live it. If I'm not going to live it, what am I doing? And I think that's the thing, like being true to myself has always been such a very important theme. It's been so like a guiding light in my life. And it comes up again and again. And I find like those times when I'm not satisfied with something that I did, especially with my work, if I'm not satisfied with it, it is often because in some way I wasn't true to myself. And if I'm true to myself, then the work carries a different energy altogether. And in other ways
1000,
too. Yeah, yeah.
1000%. I did not know that on your solar return, where you're located, that energy will be carried. And that was such great information. Thank you for that. What are the most significant astrological transits happening right now in 2026 to 2027 that people should be paying attention to? They should be like, okay, how I'm going to work with this energy. What do they need to pay attention to?
That's a great question. Right now, as you and I are speaking, we are in a period between eclipses. And this is thought to be a very important time astrologically. I mean, the ancients talked about this time as a portal. It's been spoken of as a time when the veil between the worlds is especially thin. The wisdom of our ancestors is that much more on the surface. It's that much more readily available to us. And everything can feel very heightened during this period between eclipses. And so eclipses are always something to really pay attention to over the course of any given year because they are going to represent moments of alignment when the universe tries to make it more clear, like what it is that perhaps we're meant to be doing, what a higher, more loving vision for our life just might be, and how to bring us back into alignment with that. And however far off the path we've gone from that, that's how dramatically it can feel to come back. But if we are a person who's already living like with awareness, then it's not as dramatic. It doesn't feel like, as I like to say, it doesn't feel like the universe had to spank you on the butt. It doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like the universe needed to like, shake your shoulders or anything. No, it was like, okay, I get it. I felt this way. And now I see what's going to help me to feel like what answer is going to bring me peace. You get it, like whatever it is for you. But yeah, they can be a roller coaster for some people. So pay attention to those eclipse periods like we are in right now. But the thing I've been going on about for so many years now, what I've been saying, near Star of David, right? I've been saying near Star of David since like 2017. I've been talking about this energy. And I've been saying that the world we begin the 2020s with will be a very different world that we end the 2020s with. And it's especially this year of 2026 that is this huge turning point energy. And we got a little taste of it in the summer of 2025. But really, it does come down to this larger harmonious configuration, but it's got tension in it as well. It's got this energy of opposites, but it's also got so much potential, so much harmony, so much motivation to it. And it is us moving into this whole other understanding of our collective priorities, of our understanding of self. And it's these really big, slow moving planets that are changing elements. Like that's the more simple way to describe it. But we've been in these energies for many years now that have been earth and water. And if you think about it, earth is practical, water is emotional and artistic and intuitive, And earth and water tend to be more conservative energies. They tend to be more traditional energies. But now we are moving into, and we're almost entirely there now, as you and I are speaking, but we're moving into a time, a period of many years that is going to be dominated almost entirely by air and fire. These are very different energies. These are energies that are a lot more proactive. They're a lot more empirical, rational energies. They're a lot more about your own power, your own free will, harnessing the power of mind, how you think about a thing. They're a lot more social, some of these energies as well. And it's an energy that's a lot more technological and communicative. And we can see that there are great things about both, and then there are not great things about both approaches to life. But whereas in periods in the past, we might have had balance, right? We might have had a little bit of that water or earth and a little bit of the air or fire, and it balanced out. We are going like from one extreme to another. And so it'll be really interesting to see how we choose to bring that energy forward. My hope is that with air representing mind, more people are able to develop their minds. And what I mean by that is, on a level of mind, we are equal, right? That is the great equalizer. When you think about that shift, like if we go back in history, right? 2000 years ago, in the ancient world, in some places, and we see stories of this in, like, for example, ancient Greece, where there was this belief that whatever has manifested physically, it in some way speaks to what's happening with spirit. It speaks to what's happening on a soul level. And
Mhm.
so, in that worldview, and this is going to sound disturbing as it should to us today, it absolutely should. But, there was a time when if a child was born and it had certain physical deformities, for example, or what we would call differences, it was an option to go to a mountain to do a ritual and to give that child back to the gods by throwing the child off of the mountain. Like, this was something that's documented that people did because they thought that the physical difference represented a spiritual malady, a spiritual error. But what happens, we go forward, and there were astrological reasons for it that we look at. But you think about this phrase, I think, therefore I am. This was revolutionary. I think, therefore I am. Because what this said is spirit and mind are separate from body. The material is one thing, the body is another. And up until this point, when you looked at the sky, if you saw a flock of birds, that meant something to you personally. Like, there was a relevance there. But once we separate spirit and matter, stuff is just stuff, right? And there are great things that happen with that separation, like all of equal rights where we are today is because of that. But there are not great things that have happened from that. Like, for example, if it's just stuff, you can do anything you want to the environment. You can do anything you want to animals, for example, right? So there's great things and really awful things that have resulted from this, as is the case with anything, right? We can bring out extremes of any energy, any different worldview. But it's interesting that in countries, just like people have birth charts, countries have birth charts,
Oh.
cities have birth charts. And in countries where we see strong air signatures, those countries emphasize education, and they emphasize equality. They understand that education is the great equalizer. It helps us to be able to have more opportunity, and it is on that level of mind that we are all equal. This is that much more important in those cultures and in those countries where we see lots of air. And so my hope is that we see some of that becoming more dominant. But water is very intuitive. And I do think, people have been talking about how astrology has become so much more popular in the last few years. And I think that this is because Neptune, the planet of where we find God, where we seek God, probably a better way to put it, where we seek God, has been in Pisces. And that is about spirituality. That is wanting to be connected to everyone and everything. And I think that's been what people actually go to astrology for. That's been part of what's made astrology so popular in the last few years. However, Neptune just moved into Aries. It moved into a fire sign. And that's a lot more about, being a god unto oneself. It's a lot more about spiritualizing free will and force and being bold and taking action. It's a very different way to understand spiritual meaning. And so it'll be interesting to see with these energies becoming more dominant of rationality of mind and also of self-determination, where astrology is going to fit into that. But we know astrology will fit into that because astrology is a living practice and it always adapts. It always responds to the cultural context it finds itself in so that it serves the people it's meant to in that particular context. So, yeah, I think one part of it is let's see what happens to astrology itself, but also collectively, like think about your own life. Like, where is it perhaps there might be a need to focus or to give your energy to the things that you actually have power over and to release energy over the things that you don't have power over? And where is it perhaps that some of us have allowed ourselves to kind of live, but not really live? And where isn't that working for us anymore? I think that's going to be interesting layers to what we start to see more and more of us explore in the years ahead.
Yeah, I feel like in the collective, there's so much anxiety right now. And what does astrology say about this period and what's on the other side of it?
A whole new world. I'm hearing that song in my head, right? That Disney song, because it's a very different way of looking at where we're going, what we're going to emphasize within ourselves. The great thing is that air energy is really great for self reinvention. That's one of the great things, right? It's really great for thinking things through so that it isn't emotion that controls us. And it's really great with all the fire energy to say, you know what? I'm going to go boldly in this direction. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to prioritize myself and prioritize my happiness. It's when you're a law unto yourself that it creates problems, right? When we forget other people and we think we are the only ones who exist, that we end up creating pain for not just others, but ourselves as well. And so I think that's an important part of the transition that we're going through. When you talk about hard times, the truth is there's always hard times. But what we can say is more people than ever before in human history live with greater prosperity and greater equality than ever before. We
Mm.
still have a far, far way to go for sure. But it's great that we can even have that conversation, that we can say, you know what, we can do something about this. That is leaps forward in terms of where we might have been just a few hundred years ago, in terms of our understanding of what it is to be human and the power of our own will and how we might choose to use that. And so in our own lives as well, people go through hard times. It's a part of the world we've co-created together. But I think it's what you do with it. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to try not to get emotional because I can get a little emotional when I talk about this. But because you've watched me for a while again, you might remember, you might know, in the summer of 2024, I went through perhaps one of the hardest times of my life. It was absolutely brutal. I was on bed rest for like 6 weeks. There were so many things that made it such a difficult time. And I had some really difficult things happening astrologically for me as well.
Mm.
But, I realized, like now on the other side of it, that that difficult time, it literally changed the trajectory of my life. It put me on a whole other life path. It really made me realize what actually matters. And it was in that time that I had to confront so many of my fears, like so many existential fears that I had. And to really feel like I remember being on bed rest and being so frustrated and so sad, and I felt so alone. I was in Brazil. My entire family's here in Canada. I lived in Mexico for like 10 years. So those are the places where my people are, right? Mainly. But it's kind of amazing to realize that you can find your people anywhere in the world, and that really whoever's supposed to be there is going to be there, and they don't have to be there forever and ever, and it really is okay. But I remember like sort of being on bed rest and I couldn't work, right? Because so much of my work is sitting in front of a camera,
Mhm.
and I wasn't going to like be on a camera lying down. And I remember like I had to teach, and I was teaching without the camera on, right? I had to continue to do that. But it was such a very challenging time. I mean, like I said, I was on bed rest. I needed to have a nurse for a full month. I couldn't, like, just about anything you can imagine I couldn't do for myself. And one of the big things that I had to confront was my fear of feeling like I could lose everything. Like everything I've worked for all these years, I could lose it all. And I remember this moment I had when I realized, like, and what led to that moment, it was really my aunt who said to me, just go inside. There's so much peace there. I'm telling you, just go inside. And when I did that, I had these realizations that what life is really about is soul. It is about our soul journey. It's about the soul promises, that everything else is illusion. And that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. That doesn't mean it isn't there for a reason. It's there so that you use it as a tool, but it's a tool for you to use to serve the soul, because that's what we're here for. And I remember in that place, the fear I had coming out of that, like having this meditation, this one time where I really felt like I tapped into and I touched on soul. And I realized, you know what? Whatever happens, I'll be okay. It's okay. Like being on bed rest, I'd lost all these subscribers and all this, all the stuff we get caught up in as entrepreneurs, as creators, as artists, however you want to understand what we do when we put ourselves out there. And I remember thinking and feeling and knowing I'll be okay. Like, it's okay. Whatever happens, I'll be fine. And I think that was when it really started to turn around. That was the beginning of actually coming out of it. And I think that was the point. And after that, so much changed in my life. My work has taken on different meaning. I do different things with my work, right? Like I had stopped doing client work for a lot of years, and I started doing client work again because it reminded me of purpose. Like it reminded me that there's real people, right? And for a long time, I wasn't really doing like podcasts and things like that either, for the most part. And now I am, because it's like there's a real person here. Like I get to talk to you, I get to have this moment with you. And that's part of an awakening of purpose that I realized is a powerful thing for me to stay connected to. And so you asked me about, what do we do with challenging times? And it is about, I think, embracing it and seeing how it might be there to help you in some way. And we can say this with the most awful things that happen in a life. And I'm not Pollyanna. I don't want to sound like that, because life can feel unjust. It can be cruel. I will be the first to admit it. And at the same time, we can make choices so that we don't succumb to the cruelty. We don't become the cruelty ourselves, but it makes us more loving through the journey of it. I hope that answered that question too.
That was absolutely beautiful. I had to grab my heart a couple of times, and
Oh
I felt like
gosh.
my eyes were watering. It just I remember that time when you weren't feeling well. I think I even commented on YouTube, "Take as much time as you need," Mercury retrograde, like people always talk about Mercury retrograde. Just give us a little snippet of that.
Dun, 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 right?
Yeah,
Like it's
right.
always like that with Mercury retrograde. Well, one thing I like is like people pay more attention to astrology when they hear Mercury
They
retrograde, right? So
do.
that's good. But Mercury retrograde, what I find is like Mercury represents how you see things, how you think about things, how you communicate things, how you're understanding things. And what happens is the retrograde is a time of reflection. It's a time to go within. It's a time to be honest with yourself and to examine things more deeply to get another look, right? So what happens during a retrograde? Well, what it is astrology, especially in the West, is rooted in our perception of the sky. So we determine where the planets are based on how we see them. And this is because in the West, right? And I know that's a really broad, fuzzy term, but there's a worldview that says the individual is the nucleus of society. In cultures where the community is the nucleus or the family is the nucleus of society, they understand where they are in relation to the planets differently. Because in those types of societies, for the most part, a lot of things can happen that you don't necessarily control. You have to think about other people. But in the West, we emphasize the individual will, desires, perspectives, opinions. And so it very much is understood that the individual lives in their own world, if you will. So how we see the planets is how we understand where they are. And what happens with a retrograde is from our perspective, it looks like a planet is going backwards. It's not actually going backwards. It's just more about how we're seeing it based on our relationship to that planet, whether it's a little bit before the Earth or a little bit after the Earth, as the Earth is going around the sun and that planet is going around the sun. So it's like highways in the sky. So what happens during a retrograde is it's like there's the pre-shadow and then there's the post-shadow period, which I think is not emphasized nearly enough. It's just as important in my opinion, because what happens is during the pre-shadow, there's a section of the sky. We can call it a block, a sidewalk. And Mercury starts walking the sidewalk that once he stands still and goes retrograde, he's going to go backwards over just that part of the sidewalk. And then Mercury will stand still and go direct and walk over the same sidewalk for the third and final time. Each pass is like 3 weeks. So altogether, it's about a 9-week journey, right? Altogether. What happens is with the first pass, the first shadow, that's when the universe starts showing us, what might be coming up for us right now. That's where you really want to pay attention because when the retrograde happens, we're likely returning to some of those very issues, those conversations, those desires, those connections, those insights, those plans, right? We're looking at them again. But then Mercury goes direct. And once Mercury goes direct and walks over that path for a third and final time, that is when everything looks different. And we realize, oh, I thought things were this way, but actually no. And sometimes it's just what we want. Like what we want goes through a change. And we think we want something when the retrograde is taking place. And then Mercury goes direct. And sometimes we realize that isn't what we want, or what we wanted isn't really what it's about, or it's not interesting to us anymore. It isn't what we needed. And that could be related to not just things we buy, but it could be, any person, place, thing, or situation, because it's not a time to go in bold new directions necessarily, but it is a time to go back and to look at what comes back around, what shows up. Synchronicity can be really high. So just out of nowhere, these random meetings, interactions, opportunities, especially the stuff that comes back around. And so you and I are talking right now, it's February of 2026. And we are about to start a Mercury retrograde. We're in the shadow period right now. This particular Mercury retrograde is actually very fortunate, one of the more fortunate ones I've seen in a while, because this Mercury retrograde is what I call dancing. It's aspecting, we would call it in astrology, but it's dancing with Jupiter. a planet of big blessings. And to me, this represents opportunities you thought were gone are going to come back around. Like the stuff you thought, okay, there was a chance and it went, it could be better as it comes back around this time. You might not want to pursue brand new opportunities, but see what wants to pop up, see what wants to show up for you. That is the stuff that holds the most potential to actually grow into something more, or again, to be better. And, it reminds me of this phrase I like to say. Some people say opportunity only knocks once. I think that is bull, if I may say. Like, that is just crap. Opportunity is infinite. The universe is abundant. It doesn't always look the same way. It's not always what you think it's going to be, but there's always more opportunity, always. And there's always ways for us to tap into an understanding of ourselves and what we want and how we're changing and who we are and how we might give that or share that or be that or embody that. There's always more opportunities. And so that's what I think this particular retrograde is trying to show us right about now, that there's always another chance. And it'll be fun to see how that shows up for some of us.
I love that. That is so much fun. I didn't realize that it was such a fortunate Mercury retrograde. Okay. I want to tell people how they can work with you, reach out to you, follow you. How can people do that?
Sure. I have 6 books. I'm always working on another book here, there, or 2 or 5 at any given time,
Amazing.
because I love it. It's so fun. It's really fun to write. So I love it. They can find my books anywhere books are sold, including on Amazon. They can find me on my website, nadiyashah.com. If you go online and you just put like Nadiya Shah Astrology, it doesn't even matter how you spell it, it's going to pop up right away. So yeah, just find me online on YouTube, on my website, and you'll be able to see in the superstar space you were talking about my membership. That's thefutureismagical.com. They can go there as well. So yeah, lots of places to find me online.
We will have everything in the show notes for you guys, everywhere that you can possibly find her, and maybe take a class from her with Synchronicity University. A lot of great teachers, and you teach as well, correct?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I love teaching. It's so fun. And like right now, I'm in the midst of like a multi-part class on past lives in the astrology chart. So that's been a lot of fun. But I'm starting something new this like in March, so coming up really soon. And that is going to be a series of workshops on sun signs. So every class will be its own sun sign. And I've never done anything like that before because I've always really liked working with the planets and diving into the myths of the planets. But as I've started learning about the mythologies behind the signs, it's really led me to think about like how we live myth, like we are the embodiment of myth, and that there are very few core motifs that repeat themselves over and over again throughout history, throughout the world. And there's something very human about it. Like, I love how that affirms the humanity of our experiences. And I think sun signs, the sun represents what we are becoming in this life, how that myth might unfold. And so this is going to be a series of workshops that explores that by sign, each sign one at a time. And so in March, we're going to be looking at the fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But we'll be looking at these as we go along throughout this year. I'm really looking forward to sharing that journey as well.
Well, thank you so much, Nadiya, for coming on, sharing your work, giving us your wisdom, and yeah, thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you so much, Charla. Thank you for reaching out. You sent the loveliest message, and it was a while ago, but I'm so glad it came together, and that now my hope is that we have had this conversation in perfect time for everyone concerned. But how lovely, and I thank you so much for, on the one hand, all the love that you bring and have been bringing for so long, for so many years. Thank you for that. And also for sharing me with your audience. So thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.